Father Mallon.
Yes.
Welcome to Montreal.
Thank you.
We're happy and excited to have you here. So you're part of this global movement that is revitalizing local parishes using many of the same methods that revitalize Protestant evangelical churches. Is that a correct description?
There are many things that we do that we have in common with non-Catholic churches, because if we focus on the primary purpose of the church, which we see in the Great Commission that Jesus gave us in Matthew's Gospel, to go and make disciples and then to baptize and teach them, then that task is something that, you know, what you have to do to make disciples is pretty similar across different churches and different backgrounds. Now, what we might do afterwards when someone becomes a disciple might be a bit different because of our sacraments and our unique theology and the catechesis we have to do. But that core challenge of making disciples, there'll be many things that we'll share in common.
Right. So, in your opinion, what is the origin of this global movement?
Well, if it is a movement, the origin is going to be the Holy Spirit. You know, there's no question about that. But I think that in the history of the church, there are different moments in which we witness changes in society. Pope Francis has said, this is not so much an age of change as a change of age. And we have witnessed in the last 30, 40 years the death of what I would call Christendom, a Christian culture that has really been dominant for the last 1,500 years, where the church and the world were really, the primary culture of the world was in a sense Christian. You know, you could presume that people were going to be people of faith, that they had in a sense a kind of a biblical worldview, which you can no longer conclude anymore. And yet, in spite of the fact of this huge change, in many ways within the church we still do things based on the presumption that comes from a world that no longer exists. So at those particular times, there often is an experience of decline, and often at those times, the Holy Spirit will raise different people up to speak into that. And there are many people today, many ministries, many movements, many leaders, many speakers who are identifying this moment in the history of the church and are proposing solutions to it.
So talking about many people, spirits, and people that are listening and doing something about it, are you aware of how many parishes are implementing this divine renovation methodology that you
Yeah.
came
Let me speak about that first, about what is divine renovation. I mean, it began with a book and developed into a ministry, and there are parishes throughout the world that are implementing it, seeking to implement it. And the question is, what is it? And we've struggled with that ourselves, because the original book was a theological and pastoral proposal. It wasn't necessarily a method or a methodology. But we've identified three essential components to what we might call the model that is divine renovation. Because one thing we have to be very careful of is reducing parish renewal to best practices. You know, often we can be tempted to say, I need a quick fix, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And we often say, don't copy what we do, understand why we do it. And then take it into your context and figure out what to do. You might end up doing the same thing as we do, but you might not because of the difference in your context. For Divine Renovation Ministry, we were looking at this model and we identified these three critical factors. Number one is the absolute primacy of evangelization. Like, let's not just talk about it, let's actually do it. Adult evangelization. If you make that primary, that begins to change everything, because people begin to be changed. People encounter Jesus for the first time or in a new way. They experience the Holy Spirit. They catch fire. And that drives the whole process of renewal of a parish. Second point is the best of leadership principles, being intentional about growing our leadership, because leadership is the gift that unleashes all the other gifts. And then the third essential point is empowerment by the Holy Spirit. You know, it's the one condition that Jesus gave the church before we were to leave the upper room and fulfill the Great Commission. He said, wait until you have been clothed with power from on high. So don't try to do this on your own strength. Don't try to do this just simply with good plans, but you've got to do it under the power of the Holy Spirit. So those are the three unique factors about the model of divine renovation. And within those things, there's actually a lot of room for diversification. In the end, there are certain lived principles and values that we believe, if lived in your context, will lead to fruitfulness because it'll bring about health.
And so it's the first time that you come to Montreal to speak at this conference. What are your expectations?
My expectations for my time here, I would say more my hopes. My hope is that people are simply not going to be impressed with what I have to say. My hope is that people will say, really? If that can happen where he comes from, maybe it can happen here. Because I believe that everything starts with hope, is grounded in hope. And one of the talks that I'm going to give this weekend is called The Case for Hope. Because if we don't have hope, there's no point talking about anything else. Because hope is going to release passion. Because if you really do believe that it's possible to be different, for the church to be healthy and growing and making disciples, then that's going to make you excited. And if you're excited about something, then you're going to have a vision. You're going to have a dream for what can be. But underneath it all, if there's no hope, then there won't be any passion, there won't be any vision, and there won't be any change. So my goal is to give hope that it can be otherwise.
Have you heard anything about how parish life is here in Montreal?
I know a little bit I know a bit about what parish life is like in Montreal, because one of our parishes in our Divine Renovation network is a Montreal parish, Father Michael Leclerc's parish, which is just around the corner from here, from Loyola High School, where the conference is being held. And so we've been journeying with Father Michael for a couple of years now. He came to Halifax to do an internship year with us. And so we've learned a lot about what's happening in Montreal. The truth is, it's not much different than anywhere else. You know, and I've found that everywhere I go, there's really, in spite of our uniqueness, we're far more similar than different.
In terms of change management, how do you suggest parish leadership might manage change or the resistance to it?
It's a huge question, the question of managing change and the resistance to it. Often when it comes to change in the church, what we do is we talk about what's going to change and when it's going to change. And we put very little time into talking about why. Why is it going to change? And one of the things that we recommend to parish leaders when they begin a process of renewal is you're not really going to introduce changes that are felt by people, because there's a difference between changes that you can make that people don't feel and changes that you make that people feel. It's the changes that people feel that creates pushback and resistance. There's all kinds of things you can do, even in your first year, that people aren't going to necessarily feel. But to prepare the way for changes that are going to impact people, you've got to spend a lot of time talking about the dream, about the vision, about where you're going, and awaken that desire, that dream in people's hearts. First of all, you need to have a vision. You need to have a dream. Your leadership has to have a sense of where is it we're trying to go. And then you've got to move from forming vision to communicating vision. And communicating vision isn't just about, notifying people this is where we're going. It means you have to win people over. You got to win their hearts and their imaginations. And it's a fairly simple process in one sense. You have to, first of all, define reality. Someone once said that the primary job of leadership is to define reality. So let's look at where we are right now. Let's look at the statistics around decline. One way that I found over the years is to ask people if they have any children or grandchildren who no longer practice faith. And of course, everyone puts up their hands and you say, are you okay with that? No one's okay with it. Everyone thinks that's terrible and we ought to do something about that. Great. We've created an acknowledgement that we don't like what's going on. We need to change. And then we talk about what can be, what possibly can be, what it could be like if we cooperate with the Holy Spirit. That gets people excited. And then you propose something, you propose a plan or a way to go forward and invite people to step out in faith and to trust. That's generally what's going to happen over the course of a year. We often coach parish priests to take several months, even 6 months, even a year to preach that kind of way, to preach a vision, to preach in a sense the big story. We often, in weekends at Masses, we preach a micro-narrative of the particular readings on that weekend, and we rarely tie it into a big story. But we need to help our people in the pews to realize that they are a part of a bigger story themselves.
Let's talk about prayer. So prayer is important, especially in this ministry. So what prayer rhythm works for you in shepherding people through this transformation?
One of the first things we did at St. Benedict Parish when I first arrived is we knew we were going to have to grapple with this reality of internal renewal, because we had a wonderful new building, but I came with a message that if we simply come into this place and do everything as we've always done it before, the decline will continue. You know, changing your address and your furniture doesn't bring renewal. And one of the first things we did is we mobilized all of our prayer ministries. So there were a lot of groups that did Eucharistic adoration, did rosary, they prayed for people, and we invited them to rethink how they prayed and the reason why they prayed, to stop thinking about it so much as a time of personal prayer for their own spiritual growth, but to see it as a ministry of intercession, to pray for renewal in the parish. And we used to call the side chapel, the Blessed Sacrament Chapel at St. Benedict Parish, I used to call it the engine room, because I think that what we do is a spiritual reality to begin with. So any attempt to bring renewal in parishes, renewal in a diocese, it needs to have that foundation of prayer.
Mm-hmm. So in a nutshell, what would be the 2 or 3 messages that you will hope people could take away from your conferences here in Montreal?
Number one message, that in spite of the experience of decline that seems to be all over our church, there's a bigger thing going on, and we need to seek to cooperate with the Holy Spirit, to say what has to die, let it die, and let's cooperate with the Holy Spirit to be part of something new that's being brought forth. I think that's a very important thing, and to be willing to let go of perhaps models, ways of doing things that were from a bygone era, let go even of infrastructure, buildings for the sake of the mission, and really surrender to that bigger story, because the Lord is on the move. The Lord is renewing the church, and there's great hope for the future. The second thing I would say is to really reflect on the call to be a missionary church, which means to be an outward-focused church. So often parishes run almost as private clubs for members, and that's our primary concern. But a missionary parish is a parish that's primarily concerned with the people on the outside, the people who are not perhaps members of the parish or are not in a relationship with God. And to begin to think through what that might look like. And the third thing I would say is a question for everyone to ask is, what are you willing, among your preferences, around all the things that you like about your parish, what are you willing to let go of for the sake of that mission?
To sacrifice it.
Yeah. Because here's the thing. People often say they want change. They want the change, but they don't want to change. So if you ask people, do you desire to have a parish that is dynamic and alive? Everyone says yes. Do you want a parish that's relevant to young people, that has beautiful, uplifting, inspiring liturgies with great music and great preaching and great hospitality? Everyone says yes. Do you want a parish where people experience life transformation, where people on the outside are brought in and experience a relationship with the Lord? A parish that goes out to the peripheries to reach the poor? Everyone says yes. Everyone wants that kind of parish. But you lift a finger to change something to make that happen, and people get upset. Right. So we want the fruit of change without the pain of change.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for your time.
You're very welcome.
And we're very happy to have you here.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.